Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. And it is triple trouble with me today. This is the third show, Double Trouble with Jessie. Great decode we had on the members and Patreon on the Harry Potter movie, the second Harry Potter movie. It's really, really, really great. So if any of you haven't caught that, catch it on members and Patreon. Really great decode we just did. Anyway, without any further ado, I have with me Dr. Dennis today, and we're going to be talking about cryptids in the Congo. Now, the Congo, in Africa, I mean, the Congo is the most, on the African continent, the Congo is the country that probably has the most mineral wealth. It's there where there's a lot of child transportation, etc. done. And a lot of mining. That's where they do the cobalt mining. That's all for the cell phones, uranium, all sorts of things. So in that area, there's very wonderful resources that really the whole world is after, pretty much. But at the same time, I do believe that is on a very, very powerful ley line. We talk about ley lines and grids and stuff, and we know how the dodgy ones know exactly where they are. So, of course, and I also think that there's probably a lot of cryptids because of that can come through there. Maybe some of it is folklore, legend, who knows? But let's see. So without any further ado, ta-da, Dr. Dennis, how are you? Welcome back.
All right. Doing good. I want to say good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. And
right.
Yeah, I'm going to share a little bit of poetry with you here to begin with. One of my favorite poems from childhood, a little bit of it, from Lewis Carroll. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the juju bird and shun the fruminous bandersnatch. These are the things that definitely inhabit Alice's world on the other side of the looking glass. And some of these things may inhabit our world too. We call them cryptids, or the cryptological or zoological things that are out there that we think that may be still existing, or that my favorite ones are the ones that definitely may have gone extinct, but maybe not have. May still be there, like the Tasmanian tiger and some other ones. I've always been interested in that. But the one place that we're going to talk about today, and every place, Shanti, every location has its cryptids. It has its cultural stories. And that's what's so, interesting about it. And on some previous shows, we talked about the Chickamauga, which is a sort of a goblin-like thing that can be sent by witch doctors to suck the life out of you, sort of like a vampire. We talked about that. I think we mentioned that a few shows back, but then that's fascinating. Africa, the dark continent, as it was once upon a time called, it's not that dark anymore, okay? Because there's a lot of light shining on Africa now. But it has always fascinated me, especially the Congo region. And, you were talking about that earlier. It does definitely have a lot to do with a lot of, stuff going on in the world, the more modern day stuff. But when you look at the Congo, you gotta look and realize that you're dealing with the second largest rainforest in the world, in the Congo, and you've got some swamp too. You got a lot of swampy areas there, and the interesting thing about the Congo, it's about, you could put the United States of America inside the Congo, folks. That's how big this place is, okay? And
Exactly.
yeah, it is huge. And you would still have some I would call walking around room once you put the United States there. That's how big this area that we're talking about is. So
Right.
somebody asked me the other day, Shanti, said, if there's any dinosaurs left or any monsters out there, where would they be, Dennis? I said, well, there definitely would be in the Congo. Absolutely. That's would be my prime suspect area. Yeah.
Right.
And
it would make a lot of sense what you're saying. But interesting. I also just want to draw attention to the Congo, because the Congo was colonized by the Belgians, right? King
Yeah, the Belgians. Yeah.
Leopold. And he was ferocious. And what he used to do, he was a known cannibal amongst the local people, right? And
Oh,
he used to turn the local people into basically slaves. They had to go, he wanted rubber from the rubber trees or something like that. So each slave had to collect 20 kilograms of rubber from the trees a day. And if they were not collected, right, then
yeah,
their hands were chopped off. And the hands were then collected and given to the king. Now, legend has it, or rumor has it rather, that he actually would take those hands and grind them up with chocolates. So he had Belgian chocolates made with the hands of the Congolese people that he chopped off. And apparently the chocolates were shaped like the hands. And this was his special delicacy. So I say that because, and I mean, this is just one story, right, that came from him. But I say that because, again, when we're just looking at some of the cryptids and things that folklore has it that come from the Congo, you can imagine the amount of evil that they have access to there with those portals and things where these creatures are coming through. There must be a huge amount of evil. So that was playing itself out in the colonization of the Congolese people. And to this day, they are probably of the most abused people in Africa, to this day, by the West, because of their resources.
That's a good point you bring up there, because I have noticed that in a lot of my studies over the years that some of these dark areas, I call them, in the world that you have associated with evil or bad things that have happened there, seem to draw cryptids to them sometimes, especially cryptids like the very famous Dog Man and maybe even Bigfoot, which I had an encounter with my own self. And that solved the problem for Bigfoot with me, because I know he is real without a doubt. We met eye to eye one day and found out the truth on that. But the interesting thing about this too, and that's a good point that you bring up, is that some of these things definitely, a lot of cryptids like that one I mentioned earlier, I think it's called the Chicawamba, is definitely something conjured up. It's something brought forth from darkness or from some type of other dimensional realm, spiritual realm, or whatever, however you put that. I think there are definite clues that some other cryptids are also done that, conjured up, especially Dogman, which we've talked about a lot. And we'll have to do a show on Dogman sometime for you, because I think you will find that a very interesting cryptid. But I think I actually saw him, but that's a story for another time. But anyway, the interesting thing about the Congo, you got a lot of history there. And I would warn everybody, please be careful of the Belgian chocolates you eat, okay? Definitely. But absolutely.
And then renowned, right? Makes you wonder, doesn't it, don't we, Dennis? Because the world, I mean, Belgian chocolates are world renowned for just being extra
just be careful who you take them from. That's the main thing. Yeah.
As I think enough said. They're like extra creamy. That's just disgusting.
Yeah, they are the real. I have had some Belgian chocolates. They are delicious. But I hope I didn't have any kind that witch doctor definitely was put that. But anyway, it's an interesting thing about witchcraft, that since you brought that up, that, a lot of witchcraft, people do not realize this, but a lot of witchcraft is performed through food, through giving gifts and stuff. Yeah, so be very careful what you take and who you take it from. Absolutely, very careful.
Also,
I did a show on Cleopatra the other day, and she was very adept at poisoning people. So you have to be careful who you take stuff from.
She pretty much poisoned her brothers or men, didn't she? She was more into poisoning men. Yeah, she was quite a. She was quite a I guess, but if you think about the days in which Cleopatra lived, I mean,
Oh
she was
yeah.
surrounded by men and she had to be super strategic, because she's a woman in a man's world. So I guess that's how she did it. And isn't it interesting that women will usually use poison when they kill someone? It's poison is usually their choice.
Suicide by
Yeah.
snake. Yeah, actually,
Mm.
it's the way she went out. But that's the one thing I talked about when with Cleopatra. She was fascinating because she was very intelligent. She knew like about a dozen
Mm.
languages, and usually that is a
Yeah.
sign of high intelligence when you know different languages. That shows you a thinking person. You know, and she definitely
Yeah.
was, and she was unusual for a woman of her age in that time period because she was able to do and so very adept to political stuff, and knew how to, connive a little bit and do. And she was actually after the throne of Rome. She wanted to be queen of Rome. She wanted to be the wife of the emperor Julius Caesar. But his wife
Right.
had other ideas, but so that was a problem with that. But it's a
So
fascinating
she,
story.
so
I
she,
did a great show on that. It was a show that I did. It's called, and here's the name of it: "The Silence After Rome." That's the name of it. It's about historical stuff and all that, so it's very interesting. But getting back to the Congo, there's a lot of dark history in that, and we talked about that before on one of your shows about the leopard men, which was a big cult back then. It was based a lot in the Congo as well. The leopard men was a political force, a power for a long time in African politics in that area. And it still is, supposedly to this day. It just sort of went underground and became more secretive. But supposedly the leopard men still exist in the Congo as well. So you got a very interesting history set there in this place. So it's got definitely, like
it
I said,
is.
it's on my bucket list because if I were to go anywhere to look for cryptids, Africa has wall to wall cryptids. Okay, definitely without a doubt. And we're going to talk about some of them today and some of the interesting fauna, some of the plants. Supposedly are poisonous and very bad plants. You would not want to take a nap under some of these trees, supposedly, that are out there in the bush as well. So we're going to talk about a little bit about that. But the cryptids are very interesting, and I've got some that we're going to go over. But the main one we're going to save for the end is a nightmare, definitely on 8 legs, okay, without a doubt. But one of my favorites, supposedly sighted in the Congo shanty, is I think, and I may be utilizing this pronunciation, but I think it's called the Coromantho. And what this thing is a flying reptile type thing. It's sort of like a pterodactyl looking thing. And that name, I think, is, if I got that correct, that's Congomato. The Congomato, that means flipper of boats or turns over canoes or tips canoes. Okay. In other words, this thing swoops in supposedly low over the river and will turn your canoe over and then try to eat you. Will take you off and eat you somewhere. And this is a very large, and this would definitely be a relic of the dinosaur age, if something like that
Yeah.
existed. Yeah. This
Yeah.
what the
It's
yeah.
called Mokele-Mbembe. That's what it's called,
Yeah.
Mokele-Mbembe, and that's the most famous Congo cryptid, and it's basically large, semi-aquatic, massive body,
Yeah.
long neck, and often compared to the
Oh,
dinosaur.
that's a Mokele-Mbembe. That's another one. Yeah, that's very much like a brontosaurus
Right.
appearing.
This is a
Yeah,
different one.
it's aquatic and it has a long neck, and it supposedly is seen down the river feeding off of the trees, the fruit in the trees, because it's got a neck like a giraffe on it, and it supposedly does that. It's been seen, and it will also tip over canoes. Supposedly, they are warned to stay away from these things if you see them out there. So you just give them a wide berth because they will, attack you, or maybe just not mean to maybe attack you. would tip your canoe over or give you some bad problems. And some of those rivers you definitely do not want to swim in because they are full of crocodiles. Okay, without a doubt. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why you don't want to get in the water. You want to stay in your canoe. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
For sure.
yeah, the Mokele-Mbembe, I think that's how it's pronounced, is a fascinating thing. It has supposedly been cited by several researchers and stuff over the years and talked about. Very famous. That's another one I would look. And they call it the Thunderer too, because it makes a loud noise when it goes through the jungle. And something that big definitely would. You know, it makes sense when you think about it. Would make a lot of noise. You know, pushing through the trees and the bush and all that on its route through there. So that's fascinating as well. So, you know, and I have talked about this before, and science, to me, I disagree with science a lot of times. A lot of people say follow the science, but science to me has a very small mind sometimes. They don't think outside the box. They don't like to think about other things than what they think is their own opinion is. And, you know, science tells us that mankind had never existed with a dinosaur. I do not believe that for one moment because there's too much evidence that shows that we know about these things. Well, I mean, on cave
Yeah.
drawings and footprints and all the stuff that is left behind. I mean, how could you say that without knowing the evidence that we have seen on these things? That's just ridiculous. That's you know, small-minded, a very narrow-minded person that thinks that because I believe without a doubt, you've got so much folklore, you've got so much cultural things all over the world, not just in the Congo, not just in one area, but everywhere, where people have cited these things. And I've often talked about that, Shanty. You know, what was the original name for dinosaurs? The word dinosaur was invented in 1850. Before that, we call them what? Dragons. That was what you called them.
Right.
And yeah,
Right.
and
Exactly.
I believe without a doubt that dragons have existed and may still exist in this world with us to this day in places like the Congo. That's the perfect place. And in certain mountainous
Exactly.
areas like the Alps and like in the Scottish Highlands and places like that, even in the Appalachian Mountains near where I live, there are stories of dragons being seen in these mountains. And here's the interesting thing to think for everyone to think about today. What is the number one location for dragons? They like the caves of what? Mountains. They like to sit on mountains. Okay. That's just the way dragons go. And that is the perfect place to find them. Or in places like swamps and hidden places in the Congo, like that rainforest. And the interesting thing about the Congo and the rainforest is, unfortunately, they are dwindling in size day by day. They get smaller and smaller, and this is a very unfortunate thing. If we ever lose our rainforest, we're going to be in big trouble environmentally wise, because they are a very essential part of this very world that we still exist in. They produce so much oxygen in the air. And so much the list goes on and on. So many different species are attached to these places and all that. And so, without a doubt, I do not think somebody flipped the switch, Shanty, and all of a sudden there were no more dinosaurs. I do not believe that without a doubt. That I think that they are still out there because there's just too much evidence, like the reports coming out of the Congo. And what really baffles me about this, okay? You've got so many stories of so many different ones that we're going to go over today, like the Kasi Rex. That's called, I think, the tipper. I think it's called the stomper. He will stomp you like. He's also called an elephant killer. I
Yes.
think. Yeah, you got some different ones like that. But anyway, how could you kind of, not say, hey, I need to go check that area out? When you hear reports coming back from that, places like that, why is that ignored? Why would you do that? I
Exactly.
mean, that'd be the first place I would want to go. I wrote a book called Beyond the Shadows. And in that book, I talk about the certain way you investigate areas, whatever areas they may be, whether it's a house or a building or an area or outdoors or whatever. Yeah, and one of the big rules is if something happened in a certain place, that's where you need to go back to. That's the place you need to go to.
Exactly.
I mean, it makes common sense when you think about it, That's where you need to go check it out. If something was if you come up to me tomorrow and say, well, Dennis, I saw a dragon in my backyard, I'm gonna camp out in your backyard, okay? Because I might have
Right.
a chance to see him again. Uh, so it makes sense when you think about it. But I don't understand
Exactly.
that, and that baffles me as a researcher. Why would you ignore this place? And it has been ignored for way too long by modern science. Although there have been some reports of people researchers who have gone in there, even animal photographers and all that have seen certain things and had certain things happen to them. You got, I think there's another one I think it's the giant snake is called, I've got the name down here, it's called the Nakamondo Molina. This is a giant snake supposedly seen in the Congo as well. I mean, that's fascinating. I love giant snakes too, by the way, and that is not that far fetched that you would not have something like a giant snake, because there are many reports, even in South America, of these giant snakes actually devouring people whole. Can you imagine that they have actually found snakes, actually cut these snakes open and found people in them that they would.
Is this the Nguma Muneni, which is described as a massive snake, possibly 30 to 50 feet long, and sometimes with ridges or a dragon-like appearance? Because
it has
it's exactly
sort of
saying
ridges on its back. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The large constrictor snakes do exist in Africa, like the rock pythons. And, so they do, by nature, exist there. So it would make a lot of sense to me that there would be a giant version of that snake somewhere.
That is, fascinating stuff. And I'll tell you what, here's what I say about that. And when it comes to there's another kind of cryptid, and that's what we're talking about here today. And the one that exists in this world, only bigger, okay? And the snake would definitely, we have seen some very large snakes in our times that would definitely fit the bill on that. So if you were to come up to me tomorrow and say, hey, we saw a giant snake somewhere and all that, I would say, well, that's very reasonable, because they could exist. That's not that far-fetched that you would think something like that could not be out there. And snakes are very good at hiding, okay? They're very good at how they get around in there and going in different places. So that would, that makes perfect sense, too, when you think about that. There was a time in this world, Shanty, back in the pre-Diluvian world, when things were a lot bigger. We've talked about this before. You had mosquitoes the size of eagles. Think about that a minute, folks. Would you want to get tangled up with a mosquito that would drain you dry? I mean, that would be horrible. Think about it. That is, yeah. You had eagle-sized mosquitoes at one time. You had caterpillars that were, feet long, not inches long, feet long. You had things like that were bigger back in the day, especially things like spiders that we're going to talk about that could still possibly exist out there in the bush. That does not seem that far-fetched to me, because once upon a time things were larger in this world. You still have some evidence of that behind some of the forests that are out there, some of the huge trees like the redwoods of California, and some of the trees here in Africa that we're talking about. I think this was the Balabo trees. They're huge. And there's one tree, I cannot think of the name of it, you might be familiar with. It's called the upside down tree. It looks like it's actually the roots are growing up instead of down in the ground. Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. That really, has been around since prehistoric times almost. Trees have been with us a long time. And look how big these trees are. How much bigger they are than normal trees that we have today. So there is a pattern of history in this world of things being larger on a larger scale once upon a time. And I think this includes people, because we've done, shows, we've talked about giants in the past. And I think without a doubt that the people that once lived and walked on this earth, Shanty, were much larger than people are today. And where they were, I think they also had a different DNA than you and I have. I think their
Yes.
DNA was sort of like supercharged. It was the very best DNA you could possibly have. And I think that's why some people supposedly live longer, like, for 900 years. You and I are not going to be around here for that long because our DNA is not up to that anymore. But I think once upon a time, this world that we live in was a completely different world than what we know today. And I think remnants of that world still remain in this world. There's still clues
Yes.
to it all, especially when you look at
Definitely.
cryptids. Yeah. So
Yes,
that's
definitely.
fascinating. Yeah. I mean,
Also when
I've
you
had
when you're looking
stories.
at
I've heard
carry
stories
on.
of snapping turtles that people said they have actually seen. I don't know if you're familiar too much with turtles. These are snapping turtles. They're very reptilian looking turtles, and they can take your arm off. So I have seen some big enough to really take your arm off. Possibly, if you're a small person, it could take your arm off, definitely. And I've seen reports of these things being, estimated sometimes at 6 to 8 feet across in length, in width. That is an amazingly large turtle, my friend. That's bigger than a sea turtle most of the time. And you do have big sea turtles, we know that. And look how long they live. Some of them live 300 and 400 years old. So this is not that far fetched. This is not science fiction. This is not fantasy. This is a real part of our world that, unfortunately, science, mainland science, mainstream science, overlooked it and doesn't want to talk about it. And they find these bones of giant people and they get them mysteriously disappear. Uh, Here's the thing about science that really bugs me about them. Okay, if it doesn't fit their criteria, if it doesn't fit their opinion, if it doesn't fit their or actually help them with their get their scientific research money and all that stuff, if it doesn't fit in with that, they're not going to go along with it. They're going to not only cover up, but they're going to ignore things, and that's even just as bad as covering it up in my book when you ignore things like that. But they'll
Well,
do that. They'll do that. It all comes down to grant money, very
well,
financial
I
stuff.
think the way the whole system has been rigged currently, it is rigged out. If you're looking at, let's just say, Tartaria, the mud floods, there's irrefutable evidence that
Mhm.
a much larger society existed before we did, before the great floods, or whatever. People have different perspectives on that. So that for sure has been there. And also just the way that the world has been corrupted, what's been stolen from us. If we just look again, everything from the turn of the century, from the orphan trains, the Cabbage Patch Kids, everything has been orchestrated and engineered to control the masses and to rewrite history, to take away our roots, because if we don't have roots, then we can be transplanted and we can become hybrids for anything, right? So it's been a systematic, abusive system of abuse in place for the longest time. And my opinion is they've carefully orchestrated that so that we don't know these things, Dennis. They have taken that knowledge away, but it's coming back. We're reclaiming it again, which is what we're here to do ultimately.
Absolutely, and they're insulting our intelligence. I don't like that. That's sort of a slap in the face when you try to hide things from people and cover people up and say, you're not seeing what you think you're seeing. They're trying to fool you into believing
Exactly,
something else. That's not good.
gaslighting.
That's the bad guys. That's stuff that the bad guys do, folks. Okay, absolutely. And when they do that, it is not only an insult to us, but it is actually an evil being done upon us. Okay, it is actually evil in my book that you do that way. You cover up and hide things, and you try to change history from what it truly is, and lie to people. I hate lies. And you run around lying about things, you eventually will lose what the real truth is. Okay, you will
Right.
eventually, if you deal too much in lies, you won't know what's true and what's not anymore. And that's the bad part about it. When you do that, when you deal in lies and cover up things, and try to change things away from that, and it's not just an insult; it is an evil perpetrated among people, without a doubt. And it's just as abusive as the people that are being abused. And for them to cover up and lie about it
Right.
is just abusive. Okay, socially abusive
Right.
to us in that way. We got to look at it that way. But no, if you're gonna, be a real, especially if you're doing something as fundamentally important as science, you need to be true to that science. You need to be open minded and think about that. It's like what Scripture says, and it's very true. Like you said with Tartaria and all that, there is no new thing under the sun. How very true that statement is. Just like with dinosaurs we're talking about, or even so-called civilizations that have been lost. There's a lot more to this world than people realize. And if you ignore that factor, then you are really shortchanging yourself. You are really narrowing your own mind. And that is never a good thing
Yes.
to do. No matter which way you look at it, whether you're talking about science or mathematics or rocket science or whatever you're talking about, whenever you narrow your outlook on your output on that, it's never good, because you're going to get stuck in one certain rut and you're going to ignore the truth eventually. And that is not a good thing. You never want to ignore the truth. But when you start
Exactly.
hearing about the Congo, places like the Congo, and the stories that are coming out of these places, and I'm going to tell now a story about a researcher. I don't know his exact name. We could look him up, but it doesn't matter about what his name is. He researched stuff. He's a biologist, okay, and that was his job, to go in and research different animals and stuff like that. And he got on the trail of what we're going to talk about now. There was a nightmare on 8 legs, okay. Now, if you're squeamish about spiders, you might want to think twice about listening to the rest of this, okay, because it is downright spidery, definitely. Some people I have known over the years, I'm not that afraid of spiders. I have been bitten by spiders. That's not a good thing. It hurts. But there are some spiders definitely in this world you would not want to get bitten by. Absolutely. I've met a few of them too. Black widow spiders, or brown recluse spiders, and the huntsman spider in Australia is another one. And then you have in all South America, you have the Goliath spider, which is bigger, by the way, than my hand. Think about that. Bigger than my hand. And this thing will eat live birds. It will go up in the trees and catch live birds and eat them. And the interesting thing about the spider is the gruesome way in which it gets its prey. It will put you in a cocoon, wrap you up, and save you as sort of a leftover for later. And it keeps coming back and getting more of you. It actually eats you, consumes you alive. You are alive when this is happening, okay? And yeah, it comes back and slowly feeds on you time after time and time until you're nothing but an empty
the black
hut.
widow as well? The black widow does
Yeah.
that too, paralyzes her prey, and then she consumes it slowly. So you're alive, but you're paralyzed. You're being eaten, but you're
Yeah,
paralyzed.
there's nothing much you
Isn't
can
that
do
what the
about
black
it.
widow does?
There's not a
Yeah.
whole lot you can do about it in that situation, unless somebody comes to save you. That might be the only course you have. But think about that. That is a very horrible way to go when you think about it. But spider, I think somebody once said, what is chaos for the fly is normal for the spider. That's just the way he operates. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
Yes,
it
true.
doesn't stay good for the fly, though. Unfortunately, it gets caught in the web. But this guy, who was a researcher, started noticing some very strange and odd things in the Congo that did not fall in line with some stuff. He began to see some very strange footprints in certain muddy places and all that. And he began to hear stories of people disappearing out of their camps. They would be camped out in the bush, and people would be found gone the next morning, some people without a trace. And there would be sudden kind of like drag marks there, and that was all that was left. And it said if it had been something like a lion or a leopard or something that had carried someone off, there would
Yes.
usually be a lot of blood or something. There was no blood, nothing like that. Only these drag marks. He began to wonder what the heck is going on here and what's taking these people. What's going on with that? And like it wasn't. It would be like say a camp of about 7 or 8 people, and only 1 or 2 people would go missing out of this camp. And he come to find out that these were people that were sleeping at the time on the ground. In other words, they had their, instead of being sitting on, it's a good idea if you're living in the jungle, folks, okay, to sleep on a cot above ground, okay, because there are a lot of creepy crawly things around on the ground, okay. And I've done a lot of camping in my time. I know what I'm talking about here. When you go out in the woods, you want to kind of you want to sleep raised above the ground, or if you don't want ants in your ears or whatever the situation is, you do want to stay raised. But if you ever sleep on the ground, you're kind of open territory, okay? And there have been reports of people who wake up in the morning in their bedroll and they've got like a rattlesnake in the bed with them. Bad situation. You don't ever want to get in that kind of situation because you got a big bad problem if you wake up with a rattlesnake in your bedroll, okay? So that would be a bad situation to get in, especially when you got spiders, especially poisonous spiders or scorpions walking around on the ground. You do not want to sleep on the ground. But these people were like, and what it turned out, they were what we would call guides. Okay, they were people that were hired to be guides in certain areas. They're the ones that would like throw their bedroll on the ground and go to sleep that night. And they were doing some very dangerous things because they would find them gone in the morning. And just these drag marks out there. So the guy figured, what is doing this? Because it didn't fall in line with the predator. And I've studied a lot about tigers, lions, and I love the big cats. They're very interesting animals. And that's just not the way they operate, okay? Because they're kind of messy when they do stuff, especially leaving blood behind and all that. Because here's what they usually have to do. If a lion or whatever gets you, most of the time, he's going to kill you right there on the spot and then drag you off because he's not going to drag you off fighting, okay? Put it that way. He's going to probably dispatch you right there on the spot and then take you back and eat the rest of you or whatever he's going to do with you. This is the way big predators work, okay? Now, they can be found eating on the spot. Definitely that happens. Hyenas are bad about doing this, but the hyenas and wild dingoes and dogs and stuff like that come in, they steal this stuff away from the lions and all that. And I have seen lions turn around and swipe and knock a hyena yards away. I mean, wham, they would knock out of the way, get out of here. I'm trying to eat, okay? Kind of a deal. But that's what they do. That's how they get their food, okay? They follow the lion packs and all that. They're sort of parasites to the lion. Okay, yeah. But everybody, this is the chain of life, though. Everything and everybody's got a certain place in this chain, certain job that they do and all that. That's just the way nature's set up. And that's what this guy could not figure out. What's going on here? This is not a natural thing that I know about because he knew his animals. He knew all about animals. He was a biologist, And he started following these tracks. And when he got deep into the jungle, and they warned him not to go in this part of the jungle. They said a lot of the other tribes there would say, hey, we do not go in this part of the jungle. It is a bad place. Bad place. People go there, they do not come back. Okay? They do not come back. And they warned this guy, of course, he being, what he was, he didn't pay attention to it. I know more than these people know, kind of a deal. So I know what I'm doing, those are the kind of guys that get themselves killed in the end. That's all I always used to say about if you're going to be stupid, stupid will get you killed if you're not careful, okay? That's not a good idea to be stupid. But this guy was being stupid. And it's very surprising that he lived through it, Shandy, to tell the story. But anyway, he went out on this part of the jungle, and he talked about it being a dark, denser area of the jungle, the rainforest itself. Now, if you've ever been in a rainforest, you know that the canopy above the rainforest, you have different levels of life in the rainforest. You've got things that live under the ground or in the leaves and the foliage underneath. And then you've got things that live in the trees. You've got things that walk in the jungle, like cats, the big cats, or whatever, the lions or whatever. Then you got things that live in the trees, like monkeys, or lemurs and stuff like that. And then you've got things, and spiders live in the trees too, by the way, folks. It's one of their favorite places to get. Okay. And then further up in the higher, the canopy is this called. You've got things that live up there, and that's where spiders also live. Okay. Well, he, being a biologist, knew this, but he didn't suspect spiders right off. That this was the thing going on. So as he began to follow these tracks, he found out there was a pattern to some of this jungle. And he found out, he said, that it looked like something was designing parts of this jungle to funnel you into a certain area. Think about this a minute, folks. This is highly intelligent thing going on here, okay? This goes beyond mere, nature doing what it does. The inherited, way about doing things. This shows an intelligence, like monkeys that use certain tools. We've seen them do that. I have actually seen monkeys take and wet a straw, stick it down the hole, and get worms and eat them. They were using a tool. They knew how to do it, okay? That's intelligence, okay? And so it's just not basic instinct, like the instinct that a bird goes by when he builds a nest. That's instinct. That's how it works. That's ingrained in his very fabric of his being to do these things, because it's just being what? A bird. It's being a bird, okay? And that's why we cannot blame nature for things. I don't care if it's giant snakes or whatever it is. They are being what they are. And that's the way they're set up, And it's very much like that famous story a certain president told about, the hawk that picked up the snake. There was a snake trying to get across the river. And the hawk said, "Well, I'll help you out, snake. I'll pick you up and drop you on the other side of the river." And the snake said, "Well, I'd appreciate that. Being a snake, I can't get across the river. I appreciate that." So the hawk picked him up and took him across the river. And just before he dropped him, the snake bit him. And the hawk dropped him and said, "What'd you do that for? I helped you out. I was taking you across the river. Why did you bite me?" And the snake said, "I'm sorry. I'm just being a snake. I thought you knew that."
I'm just doing,
That's me.
I'm just doing what I do.
What I do. Yeah. Yeah. If you swim with sharks, you can expect them to bite you. That's being a shark, And I haven't seen stupid people do stupid things with animals. Okay, try to get selfies with buffaloes, or go put their hand in a lion's cage.
Or lions. Lions. And you know what unfortunately happens then? Like, do you know how many tourists will come here and they'll go for like a ride in the park or something? Oh, there's a lion. They'll get out of the car and they want to like take a photograph. I mean, although there are signs everywhere, but they'll still get out, get taken out by the lion, and then the lion has to be culled. That's the thing. So it's not just the people, the animals suffer because of human stupidity. That's for sure. Interesting.
And my grandfather told me a story like that. I just happened to think about it. He told me that many years ago. He talked about a man told him the story. That this man had like 4 or 5 different sons. And one day he come in the house, he heard a horrible racket going on, a horrible sound. And went in there, and these boys had captured a house cat. And they were doing bad things to this cat. They were scaring this cat. This cat was running the walls, the man said. And the cat, whatever they had done to it, had gone wild, completely lost it. And that man got mad at his sons. He took his gun out and killed that cat and said, "What do you think you're doing? This is the stupidest thing I ever said. That cat could kill you when you're doing stuff like this to the cat." And said, "I wouldn't blame him."
Well, it should have killed them. Killed them.
But he had to kill the cat because it was completely, supposedly lost it, gone completely mad. And that's why I had to unfortunately kill the cat. But here's the thing about it. And this is what my grandfather told me. If you mistreat an animal, what do you expect it's going to do? It's not going to act like it normally does. If you mistreat a horse or a dog or a cat, it's not going to react good to that. Can you blame it if it bites you?
Yes.
Because it's doing what, it's just defending itself, That's why I say about my initials, DWC. That stands for dangerous when cornered. Okay. So that's what's going to happen. If you corner an animal and abuse it, it's going to strike back. And why are you so surprised by that? I mean, that makes sense. And any animals like the other way. And, that's why I don't like about people that say, just because a dog bites somebody, you should kill the dog. No. You need to see what the circumstances were for that happening, because maybe it wasn't the dog's fault,
Yeah,
They don't realize
exactly.
that, Yeah. And there is in
Exactly.
America a famous actress. I can't remember her name at all. She's a very well known actress. And they had the police come to her house or something one day. And they actually, while they were there, they killed her dog. And I have been, being a policeman myself, I've been in situations where we've had to deal with dogs, but I did not take my gun out and kill them just because they were being a dog. You can call the owners, hey, come get your dog, come out here and control your dog, and take care of his dog. You just don't take your gun out and kill a dog for no reason. I mean, that doesn't make sense. She's actually suing them for doing that because they had no reason to do it. The dog was very friendly. It just went up to, greet them. A dog usually thinks he lives there. And when you come to see him, he's going to come up and see you, okay? Because that's his territory. That's just him being territorial. The cats are the same way, too. You ever notice somebody comes to see you, the cat's the first one that goes out to check them out. Hey, there's somebody out here to see you, Cats do
exactly.
that.
And
Yeah.
my cats growl. When
Yeah.
when people come, they growl.
Yeah. That's what
So
somebody
yeah.
said. Somebody told me that one time, said, I always feel welcome when the dog or the cat comes out to greet me, right off the bat. That's nice, and they do that. So why would you take your gun out and kill one for no reason? That's just ridiculous. I mean, this is stupid. But I hope she wins
I
her
can't
lawsuit because
even.
it was a family pet. It wasn't a guard dog or nothing like that. I mean, that's ridiculous. But just
Wow.
because I think some policeman saw a dog coming towards them, they thought, yeah, I'll take my gun out and kill it. Um, that's stupid. But
Little
unfortunately, those things happen.
trigger happy
But
little control
I'm on
freaks.
the
It's
side of the
crazy.
animal.
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
the animal,
Exactly.
has a say so in it too. Here's the bad thing about that, Shanty. You and I've talked about that before. Animals and children do not have a voice. We are their voice. It's like that
Yeah.
old movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it many years ago. Bless the beast and the children. There's a beautiful song in there. Bless the beast. Well, they have no voice. They have no choice. And that's so very true. The dog can't tell you, hey, this guy was beating on me or doing something to me. The dog has no voice. The cat has no voice. The horse has no voice. We are their voice, and we need to be fair and just about these things, and not, so single-minded on these things and thinking and blaming the animal when a lot of times it may not be the animal's fault. And that's why I say,
Exactly.
President, don't you take a gun out and kill a beautiful animal like a lion for no reason. I mean, that's ridiculous. Or to kill an elephant just to get his tusk. And that is stupid. I mean, stupid. But there
You
are
know,
people
I've
in the
been about
world,
that.
they don't consider that. They do not consider the empathy, then they're not empathize even with an animal, much less human beings, okay? That's just the way that goes, unfortunately. So anyway, this biologist, though, he began to see a design in this. There's something going on here. He didn't see any webs or anything, but he found single strands of web that were low down in the ground, and he said that they were so strong, he had to take his knife out to cut them. Think about this a minute, folks.
Right.
Spider web so strong, you got to take a knife to cut it. That is unusual, very unusual. Now, I've run into some very strong spider webs in my time, okay? And that's the one thing. Spiders do not bother me. I just hate the spider webs because you can't get them off of you, okay? But I have run into some very strong. I have run into some that have knocked my hat off. I mean, well, they were strong, okay? Spiders can do that. But think about a spider large enough to weave a web that you got to cut with a knife like that. That is wild to think about. So he said, "There's something going on here that I don't know about." He said, "There's something really strange with this whole thing." Take a look at that, folks. Is that not a nightmare on 8 legs right there? Think about that. Look
Wow.
at the fangs on that thing. Now that is, of course, a representation. That's not an actual picture. I don't think of one, but very close to what this thing would look like in its size. Now, the size of this spider that we're talking about. Look at the eyes across there. It actually, I have seen night vision scopes of this thing supposedly down by a riverbank in Africa, in the Congo, and you could see its eyes glinting in the dark. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, been outside at night with a flashlight. But you can actually see spider eyes with a flashlight. They glow in the dark, folks.
Yes.
Yeah, they
Yes.
do.
Yes.
And you can think
Look
about
at you, that
something.
little beady eye.
This thing is the size of a large dog. Think about that a moment. Size of a large dog, like a German Shepherd or a Mastiff or something like that. Think about that a moment. That is a big spider. And that's what he began seeing, these things. And he said it led him down into like a tunnel. And he said it was not a spider tunnel. It was just like foliage had been broken and all that. He could tell that it had been manipulated. Okay. And he went down through this tunnel, and finally it ended at a big, huge dead tree that was hollowed out. And he went down underneath. This guy had a lot of courage, okay? He went down underneath this dead tree and went into a tunnel that was down up on the ground. And he said there he saw spider eggs hanging in webs, hundreds of them, the size of footballs. Think about that a moment, folks. Now, most of the time, spider eggs are about the size of a match head, okay? Think about that. Spiders with an egg like the size of a football. Did you know that we have found dinosaur eggs that were about that size? Think about that a minute. That is a big thing. And he said, when he saw this, he said, "Oh my God, I am in a spider den." And I'm getting out of here before the spider comes back. And he came to figure out what was going on here. This thing had manipulated the jungle like a trapdoor spider. Okay, now I don't know if you're familiar with a trapdoor. You know what I'm talking about. You can be walking along, all of a sudden trapdoor opens up, spider grabs you, pulls you under, and trapdoor shuts. That's it, you're gone. That's what happens with a trapdoor spider. And you think this thing was very much like that because the cover of this tunnel was covered up with foliage. And he had to move it to get into this tunnel. And he said, my God, I'm sitting in a spider den, a trapdoor spider type den. That was even worse. And if this thing is coming back, it will have me for dinner. So he said, I got out of there immediately.
Did it make the tunnel as well? Did it create the tunnel too?
Well, he said that on his way out of this tunnel, he saw bones. Some of them were definitely human bones, skulls, and all that. They were the prey of the spider. And he said, when I saw that, I knew it was time to get out of Dodge. It was time for me to get out of there in a hurry. And he said he got out, and he said he went back to report on this. And, of course, his bosses, they put, you didn't see one that big. It must have been, maybe like a Goliath spider. He said, no, this thing, according to the way he never actually saw the spider itself, like that picture that we showed. He never actually saw that, but he saw the evidence of it. And he measured the footprints of the spider. And he found out that's what it was. He actually went and looked at the cast of spider prints. Okay. This was he said it had to be weighing between 1 to 100, maybe 150 pounds worth of spider here. And he said this thing probably was the size of a large dog because of the length of its stride between its legs. He said this was a nightmare. And he said, no wonder this thing is taking people out of the tents and all that stuff. And he went back and told the people that lived there, you need to stay as far away from this part of the jungle as possible and do not sleep on the ground at night. And he told them what you need to do. You need to stake your tents up different so that nothing can get under the tent and pull you out and drag you off in the jungle and eat you. Said he told them the things to do, and he told them, oh, "Don't worry, we're not going to go around that part of the jungle. We're not going to mess around there, because that's the part that we said we told you. You go there, you don't come back." We were amazed that he came back. They were amazed. They thought, he was magic or something, that he would actually come back from that, and he was going to go back and find. What he wanted was photographic evidence. Him being a biologist, he wanted actual photographic evidence. And there is, I've also seen a supposed, now, like I say, this was taken back many years before such a thing as AI and stuff like this, of a spider captured on film going through a forest. And if this thing was the size of a guess, I would say at least the size of a cow.
Wow.
Going through the forest, running through there. And let me tell you something, okay? If you were to walk up on this spider, I don't care if you're even an Olympic runner, you're not going to make it, because he's got 8 legs and you only got 2. He will be over you so fast you wouldn't know what happened. That would be it. It would be like a cheetah. Cheetah would get you before you could turn around. The spider's going to get you before you breathe, okay? There's no way you can run from this son of a gun. And he said that's the one reason why he thought about going back and getting this evidence. Maybe I might see it. I might find it. And that's the one thing, and I've wrote a thing about the 10 commandments of monster hunting. And that's one of the things is one of the main rules of monster hunting, okay? The hunter must never become the prey. And you never want to do that. And he would have been the prey for this thing. He said, this thing, if it does exist, and he felt without doubt it does, because he's seen too much evidence that tells him. Too many stories were told to him by people that actually seen this thing and lived to tell about it. And not many people live to tell about seeing it, okay? Because you just didn't make it out of that encounter most of the time. And the only time, he said the interesting thing about this, Shanty, was the only time this thing was ever spotted was from a way at a distance. It wasn't close up to it. If you were to run up on this thing very close, there's no way you'd get away from it. That would be it. It would be over for you that quickly. Even if it shot a web on you and kept you from running or whatever, you're not going to outrun this thing. And so he said the only time that they actually had eyewitness reports were people that saw it from a distance, way off in the, in the forest there or whatever the situation was. And you can understand that when you think about it. I've said that often about werewolves. I've had a lot of people talk about that over the past. You don't have a whole lot of werewolf reports, eyewitness reports, because nobody ever lives to give one. That's just the way that usually goes. And I think that would be also a problem with this giant spider, definitely. But I think that is absolutely fascinating. I would love to go find this thing. But he went back and told his bosses about it. And they said, you don't need to mess with that. We're not going to worry about that giant spider. To heck with it. We got other research grants we got to do. We don't want to mess with that. Don't worry about it. They wouldn't let him go back and look anymore for it. But he said that, he was determined that one day when he retired, or got out of it, he was going to go back and look for this spider. Definitely. He wants photographic evidence of it. So I hope he succeeds. I would love to see what this thing truly looks like. But he said it had to be a horror on 8 legs. Definitely. And what it would do to you would not be pretty. Not at all. But him finding those bones in there, that was the clincher. The human skulls. How many people has this thing eaten, And he said, and here's the interesting thing. I'll leave you with this note on this. He said this thing actually found out why he couldn't see it on the ground, because it was living up in the trees. That's where it was at. And here's the way this spider was attacked. It would funnel you into this area and then drop down out of the trees on you.
Wow.
Grab you and take you back up in the trees. And then when it got through feeding on you, take it back to its nest and keep you for leftovers. That's probably what your fate would be.
That could make sense.
What he told those people at the end, said, when you go in the jungle, always keep an eye on the trees. Because you never know what might be waiting to get on you from the trees. And that's very true. That would be one area you definitely want to watch for the giant spiders. And you mentioned Harry Potter. at the beginning of the show, which I'm a big fan of. I always liked Harry Potter. There is one scene in Harry Potter, I don't know if you've seen this movie, where they actually run into some giant spiders out in the woods. Oh, you need to see that. It is a really
This
great
is the
scene.
movie we just
Yeah,
decoded it today. Yes, that one. This is the second one.
yeah, yeah. It was amazing. I really enjoyed that. But that is definitely one thing that goes over into nightmare territory when you think about it. A giant spider. And like I said, folks, it is not that far fetched that this thing does not exist. I believe it does, without a doubt. It is out there walking out there in that rainforest somewhere right now, looking for more prey. If you look at the Goliath spider in South America and the huntsman in Australia, they're not that far from this thing. Okay, only this thing is a little bigger. Um, to me, that would make it very dangerous. That would make it the real true king of the jungle. Okay, that would be the one thing that rules out there. Nothing would stand in his way. He's talked about finding different types of bones in there, lion bones, monkeys and stuff like that. All different things he was found in there, and amongst the human bones. So this thing, when you walk into the jungle, you will prey no matter who or what you were for this thing. Without a doubt, that is a nightmare, definitely waiting to happen. Um, so next time you go camping, you might want to definitely do want to sleep on the ground,
I think
sleep with one
not.
eye open,
Wow.
just to be on the safe side. Yeah.
I think not. Wow. But it's amazing that that there would be those certain areas that still definitely have these giant creatures. For sure. For sure. Wow. Very, very interesting. Stay away from
That was
the
good. I would
tropical.
advise everyone watching today, do some research on it. Just look up the Congo on Google or whatever.
Mm,
Fascinating stuff.
yeah.
And there are whole pages of nothing but the cryptids in the Congo. There is much more than this. We just scraped a little bit of the surface of them.
Yeah.
There are a lot more than this. And most of them are living dinosaurs, if you want to look at them that way, definitely.
Yeah, a lot of them are like snake-like dragon type creatures, water creatures, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
interesting in the Congo as well. They've got a lot of their water type cryptids, which is
And
interesting.
I believe without
It's
a
big
doubt
looking.
that, there were such things as dragons, or what we would call dragons,
Mm,
and that they may still exist in this world. And I think there are certain areas of this world, like the Congo, and we might even have to do a show one day on what's beyond that ice wall in Antarctica. Uh, there are different places in the world that we have not explored. We were lied about. We were told lies of that when we were children. Oh, the whole world's been explored. We know everything about it. That's a bunch of bull. There's a whole lot of territory on this planet that has not yet been, explored.
totally. Mm,
Mm.
totally. Absolutely. I agree. Outer space, and I think outer space really means on the other side of the ice wall. That would be a great show to do. Do we have intel on that?
Yeah, we'll have to do that one day, do the ice wall, because I think there's a lot more waiting for us beyond the ice wall than just Nazi flying saucers. Okay, I think there's a lot more
With NASA
interesting stuff.
written on the side
I
of
think
them.
I think if you were going to find a lost civilization, that's the prime area to look for. Definitely, the
Yeah, for
Antarctic.
sure. But I mean, I have no doubt that there must be a lot of classified information that they've definitely not
So that
released um,
Admiral
on that.
Byrd and all
So,
that the operation that he did down there, that was very interesting too. A lot of strange reports coming out of place. Not only the Antarctic, but the Arctic itself. These are still large and vast unexplored areas with a lot of interesting mysteries attached to them. When you go back, and I've done a lot of research on this, throughout the centuries, not just in our recent times, but throughout the centuries of history, there are tales and stories of supposedly underground civilizations and areas like that underneath the earth. And I think it's very interesting. And go back to what the Bible says about that is it makes a very interesting statement. And I quote the Bible a lot because it's one of the most ancient books that we have on record, and it has turned out to be archaeologically true. Okay, that's why I can go by and verify it a lot on many different things. And it says a very interesting statement in there. I'll have to find it exactly where, but it says that to the inhabitants of the earth and those that inhabit the earth and water, and those that live in the earth. Makes a very broad statement. It checks that out, and you got to wonder what's it talking about here. So that's a fascinating aspect. That and like I said, the greatest unexplored area of this world is right beneath our feet. We do not know what's down there.
Exactly, a lot, and we slowly but surely we're finding out, which is wonderful. So.
Yep.
Together we'll figure it out, guys. Stick around. Wow, yep. Very interesting, Dennis. Thank you. And I think maybe with the next show we should do What's Beyond the Ice Wall. That's next week, by the way. Can we do next week Thursday?
Yeah, we might do that. Yeah, that would be good. I'll do some more research on that. Operation High Jump was a very interesting thing that Admiral Byrd was. And I would like to research him a little bit more. And actually, I think I met his nephew or talked to his nephew about that one time, the guy that knew him well. And there was a lot more to Operation High Jump than people realize going on with that. There's a lot, like I said, we said in the program today, there's a lot being covered up. There's a lot that we're not being told. And shows like this and other ones, we don't like that. We want the truth. We don't want the truth to be held from us and covered up from us. We don't know what's really going on here. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Too much has been hidden. But we'll figure it out as we go along. So thank you, Dennis. I very, very much appreciate you sharing your time with us this evening and your knowledge and your expertise. And we will see you back next week, Thursday, guys. So Dr. Dennis will be back next week, Thursday. And then, yeah. And in the meantime, take it easy. I think it's 8 o'clock at night here. I'm going to go and have some dinner. And I will see you guys back tomorrow. Yeah, we Tyler Northcutt tomorrow, the guy that reads faces. Very interesting. He'll be on at 7 o'clock. And I'm doing In the Field with Shanti, talking about MK Ultra and MK Often. How do they work together? Blah, 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 blah. And of course, giving you my spin on everything. So I'll see you. I think that's 4 p.m. Central Africa time, my time, tomorrow. Thank you, beautiful people. Thank you, Lisa D, Emma Turns, Blue Eyed Bandit, Sweet Bee, all of you. I appreciate you very much. God bless you all. And Dennis, before, is there anything you'd like to just end off with? And also just tell the viewers where everybody can get hold of you.
Well, actually, I invite everyone over to my channel, Hunting the Shadows. Come on over, subscribe, and join us. We have some very interesting programs tonight. I'm going to be talking about remote viewing and psychic powers. So that's going to be an interesting show on Hunting the Shadows. That's at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel and agency. I have an agency as well. So check us out there. And Friday night, we'll be doing another great show on Paranormal Point of View. That's also at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Hunting the Shadows. And also, you can check out my books on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I also have a paranormal consultation service. If you want to tell me a story, you want to ask them questions, I am always available. It's completely free of charge. You can reach me at DennisWCarroll.com.
Thank you, Dennis. And
Thank you.
We shall see you back next week on Thursday. In the meantime, everybody, you know the drill. Take it easy. Stay cool. Stay calm. Stay cute. Yes, just stay cute. Bye.